picture this. It's negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit in the Alaskan wilderness. Snow pounds horizontally in the wind. Modern survival experts with their high-tech gear would be dead within hours. Yet for over 3,000 years, entire families slept soundly through these deadly nights, warm and comfortable, using nothing but materials they could find on the frozen ground. No electric heaters. No down sleeping bags. No insulated tents. How did the Inupiat, Yupik, and other Alaska Native peoples master something that would kill most of us today? The answer reveals an engineering marvel that puts our modern survival technology to shame. What they built was so ingenious, so perfectly designed for Arctic conditions, that we're still trying to understand how they did it. Imagine stepping into an Alaskan winter 300 years ago. The sun hasn't risen in months. Temperatures plummet to negative 50 degrees. Wind screams across the tundra at 70 miles per hour, driving snow like frozen bullets. The cold is so intense, it can freeze your breath before it leaves your mouth. One mistake, one drafty shelter, one moment of exposed skin, and you're dead. This wasn't a camping trip. This was everyday life for thousands of people scattered across Alaska's coastlines and interior. Families with infants, elderly grandparents, pregnant women. They all had to sleep through these brutal nights, month after month, from October through April. There were no rescue helicopters, no emergency shelters, no backup generators. The environment was actively trying to kill them. Arctic wind can strip heat from your body 30 times faster than still air. Snow accumulates in drifts 20 feet deep. The ground freezes solid to depths of several feet. Available fuel is scarce. No forests for miles in many areas, just scattered driftwood and the occasional whalebone. Yet archaeological evidence shows these communities thrived. Generations lived to old age. Children grew up healthy and strong. Entire cultures flourished in conditions that would devastate modern cities. When European explorers first encountered these settlements, they found people who seemed impossibly comfortable in their frozen world. How could humans not just survive but thrive sleeping in the deadliest climate on Earth? How did they solve a problem that still kills experienced mountaineers and Arctic researchers today? The physics seemed impossible. Heat rises and escapes. Cold air sinks and penetrates. Wind strips away warmth. These are fundamental laws of thermodynamics. But Alaska Native peoples had figured out something revolutionary. They had discovered principles of thermal engineering that wouldn't appear in Western science textbooks for centuries. They had built sleeping systems so effective, so perfectly adapted to Arctic conditions, that they could maintain comfortable temperatures while storms raged outside. What they created challenged everything we think we know about surviving extreme cold. But how exactly did they do it? The secret started underground. While most people imagine surviving winter means building up thicker walls, higher roofs, bigger fires, Alaska Native peoples built down. They excavated their winter homes partially into the earth itself, creating what engineers today call semi-subterranean structures. Think of the ground as a massive thermal battery. Even in Alaska, soil temperatures just a few feet down remain relatively stable year-round, usually around 32 degrees Fahrenheit. That's still freezing, but it's 70 degrees warmer than the surface air during the worst storms. By digging their sleeping spaces into this thermal mass, they instantly gained a huge advantage in the war against cold. But excavation was just the beginning. The Inupiat, Yupik, and other coastal peoples then built sophisticated frames using driftwood and whalebone, materials that Arctic storms had delivered right to their doorstep. These weren't crude huts. Archaeological evidence reveals precisely engineered structures with curved rafters that distributed weight perfectly across the excavated space. Over this frame, they layered thick blankets of sod and turf. Not just any sod, carefully selected organic material that created an insulation barrier sometimes 3 feet thick. This created what modern engineers would recognize as a super-insulated envelope with thermal mass integration. The sod didn't just block wind, it absorbed and stored heat during the day, then slowly released it through the night. The result was a structure that worked with physics instead of fighting it. While surface temperatures swung wildly from day to night, the interior remained remarkably stable. The thermal mass of the Earth below absorbed excess heat. The thick sod envelope prevented rapid heat loss. The curved design shed wind and snow loads automatically. These weren't desperate shelters thrown together for survival. They were precision-engineered thermal systems designed and refined over thousands of years. Each element served multiple functions, creating redundant layers of protection against the cold. And this was just the foundation for an even more ingenious sleeping system that addressed the deadliest problem of Arctic survival, staying warm while unconscious for 8 hours at a stretch. The real genius revealed itself inside these underground homes. Alaska native builders had discovered something that modern thermodynamics textbooks teach as fundamental. Warm air rises, cold air sinks. But instead of fighting this principle, they engineered their entire sleeping system around it. They created what they called cold trap entrances, long, deliberately lowered tunnels that led into the main living space. Dense cold air, being heavier, would pour down these tunnels and pool at the bottom, well below where people slept. Meanwhile, the main floor was raised at least a full step above the tunnel entrance. This simple elevation change created an invisible barrier that trapped the deadly cold air where it couldn't reach sleeping bodies. But they didn't stop there. Against the rear walls, they built raised sleeping platforms, wooden benches elevated another 2 to 3 feet above the main floor. This placed sleepers directly in the warmest thermal layer of the entire structure. Heat from seal oil lamps, body warmth, even breath, all rose and concentrated exactly where people needed it most during the vulnerable hours of sleep. These sleeping platforms weren't just elevated, they were precision, designed comfort systems. The base was constructed from springy willow branches that provided cushioning and prevented pressure points. Over this went carefully prepared caribou hides, and here's where Alaska native engineering becomes almost magical. Caribou hair is hollow. Each individual hair contains an air pocket that creates extraordinary insulation. A thick caribou hide doesn't just block cold, it creates thousands of tiny thermal barriers that trap warm air next to the sleeper's body. Modern sleeping bag manufacturers spend millions trying to replicate what Alaska native peoples achieved with materials they hunted themselves. The best synthetic insulation we've developed still can't match the thermal efficiency of properly prepared caribou fur. But this wasn't the most shocking part. These weren't individual survival shelters. Many of these winter homes housed multiple families, sometimes 20 or more people sharing the same thermal envelope. What seemed like crowding was actually brilliant thermal engineering. Multiple human bodies generated a collective heat source that warmed the entire space. Shared body heat meant survival for everyone. Here's the revelation that changes everything. These people weren't just surviving winter, they were comfortable. Archaeological evidence and historical accounts describe Alaska native families sleeping soundly through storms that would kill modern survival experts in hours. Children playing, elders crafting tools. People living full, warm lives in temperatures that would freeze your skin in minutes. But the most incredible discovery comes from testing reconstructions of these systems. When researchers built authentic replicas using traditional materials and methods, they found interior temperatures consistently 30 to 50 degrees warmer than outside air. During -40-degree storms, these ancient sleeping systems maintained interior temperatures in the 40s and 50s. Modern emergency shelters can't achieve these results. They had solved heat retention more effectively than our best technology. The shocking truth: we didn't advance beyond Alaska native thermal engineering, we forgot it. When Europeans arrived with different building traditions, this 3,000-year-old science was gradually abandoned. We replaced precision-engineered thermal systems with brute force heating, burning massive amounts of fuel to overpower cold instead of working with physics to outsmart it. Alaska native peoples had achieved the holy grail of cold weather survival, passive heating systems that required minimal fuel input while delivering maximum thermal comfort. They had essentially created biological heating systems powered by their own bodies and supplemented by small, efficient oil lamps. The ultimate twist: they weren't primitive people making do with crude technology. They were advanced thermal engineers whose solutions were more elegant and effective than most of what we use today. Every winter, power grids fail across cold regions. Ice storms knock out electricity for days or weeks. Heating systems break down when temperatures plummet. Millions of people suddenly find themselves helpless in their own homes, completely dependent on infrastructure that can fail catastrophically. Just this past winter, Texas experienced widespread power failures during extreme cold that killed hundreds of people in their own houses. Alaska native thermal engineering offers solutions that don't depend on external power, complex supply chains, or fossil fuels. These are passive systems that work automatically, requiring no electricity, no natural gas, no deliveries of heating oil. Once built, they function continuously using only materials available locally and heat generated by human bodies. Consider the implications for disaster preparedness. Modern emergency shelters are temporary solutions that require constant resupply. They're expensive, complex, and often fail exactly when they're needed most. Alaska native winter homes operated reliably for entire seasons using renewable resources and principles that never stop working. The thermal mass principles these peoples mastered are being rediscovered by modern green building designers. Underground homes with thick thermal envelopes can reduce heating costs by 70 to 80% compared to conventional construction. The cold trap ventilation systems are being adapted for modern passive solar homes. Even the elevated sleeping platform concept appears in contemporary designs for off-grid cabins. But there's a deeper lesson here about resilience. Alaska native peoples built systems that failed gracefully. If one element stopped working, the others continued providing protection. Modern heating relies on single points of failure: lose power, lose heat. Their approach created redundant safety margins that kept people alive even when individual components failed. Climate scientists are now studying these traditional systems as models for adaptation to extreme weather. As climate change brings more frequent power outages, infrastructure failures, and extreme cold events, we need heating solutions that work independently of complex technological systems. The efficiency of seal oil lamps is particularly relevant. These simple devices provided steady heat output for hours using small amounts of fuel. Modern research shows they achieved nearly complete combustion, extracting maximum energy from available resources. In a world increasingly focused on energy efficiency and reduced consumption, these thousand-year-old technologies offer proven solutions. Emergency management agencies are beginning to incorporate traditional shelter principles into disaster response planning. The combination of thermal mass, passive insulation, and elevation changes can be adapted using modern materials to create emergency shelters that protect people without requiring external power sources. These aren't museum pieces or historical curiosities. They're field-tested survival technologies that work reliably under the most extreme conditions humans can face. Have you ever experienced a power outage during cold weather? What would you do if your heating system failed for weeks during a severe winter storm? These traditional thermal engineering principles could literally save lives in emergency situations. Think about your own home's heating system. How many single points of failure does it have? Electricity, natural gas supply, working furnace, clear vents. If any one element fails, you lose heat. Alaska native systems were designed to keep working even when individual components failed. The thermal engineering mastery of Alaska native peoples represents just one example of sophisticated traditional technologies that we've forgotten. Across the Arctic, indigenous peoples developed solutions to environmental challenges that modern science is still trying to understand and replicate. Next time, we'll explore how traditional food preservation techniques kept meat fresh for months without refrigeration, using principles that could revolutionize food security in areas without reliable electricity. The physics behind these ancient methods challenges everything we think we know about bacterial growth and food safety. If this story of forgotten thermal engineering fascinated you, Subscribe to discover more lost technologies that could change how we think about survival, sustainability, and resilience.